So, traditional Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. To understand atheist and agnostic.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Preston.
We've done a lot of exploration of saints that suck.
Yeah, we've been a little bit critical of the Catholic Church in our last 3.5 years.
Yeah, it's been a good run. We're on episode 99.
99. This is 99 today, everyone. That's really exciting. But yeah, we've talked about this. The sex abuse. We've done 2 episodes of saints that shouldn't be saints. Even 2 weeks ago, I mean, we weren't mean, but I had some criticisms in last episode. But
there are good ones.
We're gonna turn that around on
the Holy Watermelon Podcast.
Watch us rank for top Catholic podcast, like we were ranked for top Christian podcast, and I was like, I don't think they've ever listened to us. And we're going to talk about good saints today, saints that actually did good humanitarian works and not just reused needles. Looking at you, Teresa.
In both of our Saints That Shouldn't Be Saints episodes, we talked about how just awful Teresa of Calcutta is.
Yeah. Anytime someone's like, I love Mother Teresa, I'm like, well, you shouldn't. And let me tell you why. I'm kind of a dick about it, but we're gonna
focus on the good
turn
ones.
a new leaf.
Sure.
Cut a new cloth.
Sure. I like it.
And I think we have, 8 or 10.
We got 7 here.
7, okay, to talk about. Would you like to start with our first one, Preston?
All right.
Saint Angela.
Angela Merici? It's an Italian name, so I have to assume that C makes that noise.
Like bruschetta.
So Angela Merici was born in Venice in 1474. At the age of 60, in 1535, she started the Company of St. Ursula. And this is all about getting women to spend their lives educating girls. So that's kind of cool.
I think it is pretty cool. There's a bit of a flip side to this because it was the 1500s. So most of the education provided to these women was to help them become better wives and mothers, which wouldn't really fly today.
Sure it
would. But this was the only education women were getting. And the idea behind it was that if women were better wives and mothers, family life would improve and therefore society would improve. And I can get behind.
This is right at the very beginning of the Reformation era, too. People are responding to all this criticism against the church. And so getting more people to like the church for various reasons plays well.
And providing more resources. I can see that, yeah.
A better power for good in a community that's starting to see the cracks and the problems.
This was also, and we'll talk about a few more of these, what the Catholic Church calls secular institutes, which seems like a weird choice because it's religious, but it's where regular people could learn and live by church standards without having to become part of the clergy or become a nun. Right. So that's what they mean by secular, not non-religious, just of the world.
Yeah.
I had to do some research on that. I was like, I don't know what they mean by secular because it sounds very religious.
Yeah, the word secular has evolved a wee bit.
Yeah.
So Angela died in 1540, age of 65. She only got to do this work 5 years.
Too bad. Not a bad calling.
Right? But she died doing what she loved. She was canonized in 1807, so this is a good while later, without any recorded miracles, just the belief that she was particularly holy.
You know what? I like that. Instead of grasping for miracles like we've heard and we'll probably still hear in today's episode. But it's just nice to be like, no, she was just a good person.
Yeah, miracles are typically part of this thing that validates beatification and canonization. People just really liked this lady.
I actually have more respect for that.
Sure. It's like the church was honest and didn't need to make up weird stories. Right. People do still pray to the saint and good things happen and they get connected together. But at the point she was canonized, no recorded miracles.
People pray to her. Angela's the patron saint of orphans and cripples.
It's a good patronage to have.
Yeah.
So her feast day has moved around a fair bit. I thought this was interesting. She actually didn't have a feast day right away when she was canonized in 1807. Her cultus had to wait until 1861.
Wow.
And she got basically a random day. The Pope decided that it didn't need to be the anniversary of her death, which is normal, but not like 100% all the time. So she was given May 31st.
Mm-hmm.
And then 100 years later, in 1955, the Pope of that time decided that Angela's Day should instead be given to Mary. Mary's got a bunch of days for herself.
Mother Mary.
Yeah. So this day was specifically about Mary's queenship, that she's a queen in heaven now. She's got so much authority being the mother of Christ.
Especially in Catholicism.
Yeah. So Angela got bumped to the following day, June 1st. Her memorial feast day was moved again in 1969.
Ew.
Finally, this time it was moved to her death day, January 27th.
And it's stayed.
It has stayed there since.
Right.
And it's less likely to move again because it is a personally meaningful day.
Angela also has dozens of schools dedicated to her across North America, a few more in Ireland, and some others around the world.
That's Angela.
There's a theme with these great saints.
We do have a particular thing that we happen to like and appreciate.
So they're women?
Sure.
That's what I was getting at, is that we have a lot of women.
I was thinking education.
Oh, that too. Education and actually helping people. So this next one is Elizabeth Seton.
I think it's Seton.
Seton, Seton.
So a school that's named after her is Seton Hall.
Oh, okay.
And I know that that's the way other people pronounce it.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, we'll go with Seton.
I'm leaning into that.
All right. Saint Elizabeth Seton followed in Angela's footsteps quite closely. So Elizabeth Ann Bailey was born in New York City in 1774. She was born into an Episcopalian family, but converted to Catholicism in 1805 after the death of her husband, William Seton. It was 1800s, so education was based in religion, but Elizabeth made sure that children were well educated and the less fortunate were cared for. You like
Good
that?
stick.
It is.
So she ended up organizing the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph, not to be confused with the dozen other organizations known as the Sisters of Charity. This one's St. Joseph. And this was all about helping children of the poor in Maryland.
In 1811, she adopted the rules of the Daughters of Charity, different from the Sisters of Charity. I had to do a few double takes on this, which was an organization founded by Vincent de Paul. And she ran the first American branch of the Vincent de Paul Society, the Society of St. Vincent de Paul.
Very cool. We'll talk more about him later.
Well, yeah.
Liz died in 1821 at the age of 46. So Elizabeth Seton's influence has had a very lasting impact. There are a whole bunch of hospitals and schools that continue her work with the Daughters of Charity. And Liz is credited as the first American saint. Though she was born before the actual Declaration of Independence, she did grow up as an American. And she was canonized in 1975. Her feast day is January 4th.
She did have a miracle. So the miracle that gets her on this list is that in 1952, so this is actually after her beatification, when a nun prayed to her instead of Christ, a child was cured of leukemia.
I always feel like it's a little bit weird that all this prayer is offered to saints, and the saints get all of the credit when somebody gets healed instead of the God that all of these faithful people actually claim to worship.
I mean, Christianity at its best is questionably monotheistic with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then Catholicism is even worse because of their saints.
Catholicism will always claim to be monotheistic, and then absolutely every behavior denies it.
It's like I was telling a Preston, I'm working on transcripts for our podcast, so if you're listening, check those out. But the Greek and Roman pantheons, it's like, well, who do we pray to if we need orphans? Not Jesus.
Right?
Saint Angela. Yeah, so as Preston mentioned, Elizabeth has more than a dozen schools named after her, and she's the patron saint of Catholic schools and widows. So if you're a widow or a Catholic school board member, forget Jesus. Think Liz. Saint Liz.
There are other patrons for both of these things, so her whole deal isn't even that special.
I think there's so many saints, there's got to be multiples for almost.
There's a lot of overlaps for a lot of things.
You know what? I need to look into this, but there's so many more modern things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who is the patron saint of like computer chips?
You have to look it up, but I'm sure there's already somebody given that job.
We said his name already. The first man on our roster, Vincent de Paul.
He was a French guy.
And he spent his life dedicated to serving the poor. Have you ever read Angela's Ashes?
No.
It's a memoir about growing up in poverty in Ireland.
Okay.
And the mother in the story, Angela, frequently talks about, you better go to St. Vincent de Paul because we need stuff. And they had no money. So that's what I'm familiar with, St. Vincent de Paul.
Well, you're ahead of me on that one.
And they still have, like we have Goodwill here.
Mm-hmm.
They have St. Vincent de Paul. Yes, so as Preston mentioned, Vincent was born in France in 1581, and he worked hard to raise himself from poverty and got himself kidnapped by Ottoman pirates in 1605.
I love this story.
I read that it was questionable whether it was true or not.
So there is a lot of doubt on this story.
But it's so good, we're going to tell it anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Take it away.
I dug deep into this one a little bit. That there's a lot of people that are like, I don't know why he tells this story, but he did tell the story himself. It's the stories that we're getting aren't forgeries later from somebody else. It's just, why is he telling these stories? Are they true? If they're not, where was he for those 2 years? So nobody agrees. It feels like it might be true, or maybe they're just a little embellished. You'll see as the story goes along.
All right, I'm excited for Preston's story time. It's been a minute.
Our buddy Vince was kidnapped by Ottoman pirates in 1605, and he became the slave of a fisherman. But the young man suffered from terrible, terrible seasickness to the point that he was just useless. So he was sold shortly after being snatched up. Vinny's next owner was an alchemist, which I think is really cool. And this work suited him much better. On the way to Istanbul, the old alchemist died, so Vince was sold to a former Catholic priest named Gil. Gil converted to Islam previous to this to gain his freedom. And lucky old Catholic priest has 3 wives now, because now he's a Muslim.
Yeah.
One of the wives, however, started talking to Vincent maybe a little bit more than she should have, and wanted to know all about his religious beliefs and everything. And she ended up being converted. Then she got after her husband for abandoning this great faith that she now had discovered. And so they all went back to France as Catholics in 1607.
Maybe that was his miracle story. Maybe he was priming himself to be a saint. I don't think so. He's, minus his dubious story, he's pretty selfless.
Yeah. I mean, he always tried to be a good guy. And I mean, as a slave, he really put himself into his work as much as he could, according to his own account.
Yeah.
Minus the seasickness, which, you know, it's good to have an excuse when you do a bad job of something.
Unlike Mother Teresa, because I gotta dig at her, he believed in raising the poor out of their circumstances.
Sure.
Of getting them out of poverty.
Instead of saying, we need the poor.
We need the poor because it reminds us of God's grace. I mean, he chose to be poor because in some of the things I read that Jesus gave up his worldly goods to be with the poor, but he believed in getting people out of poverty. Of course, he evangelized, but he helped the poor impartially and didn't convert them secretly, Teresa.
Yeah. So within Catholicism, he is considered the father of modern charity. That idea of give what you can to the people who need it. Yeah, it's not so bad. Not only did he serve the poor, but he set up systems to ensure the charity was collected and distributed equitably and efficiently. We struggle with efficiency today.
I mean, still, yeah. So he helped refugees in France during the 30 Years' War and created processes to ensure that food, tools, clothing, and money could reach the right people, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. And at the start of the war, he had homes built to house orphans. So these children were taught to read and write, and they received vocational training as they got older. So they've really been elevated out of this cycle of poverty.
Yeah, like, again, actually helping people.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
You love to see.
For sure. So Vinny died in 1660 at the age of 79. All these myths that, you know, the average life expectancy was 35 until 200 years ago. nonsense.
It's because everyone died when they were babies.
Not everybody, but definitely an awful lot.
Enough to lower.
If you made it to age 10, there was a really good chance you made it to 20. If you didn't die in combat, there was a really good chance you made it to 80.
Yeah. Yeah, so there were other factors that lowered the average life expectancy.
I mean, good medicine also made it easier to make it to 80.
Right? And I mean, not that cancer isn't bad, but like, that's basically all that'll wipe people out now is cancer.
Pretty much.
That's all that's left. So that's kind of cool.
Actually, I heard about a new flesh-eating bacteria that's really a real problem in Japan.
Okay. Well, that's horrifying. So we're going to talk about
Something
Vincent
nicer.
de Paul's canonization in 1737. His feast day was originally July 19th, but was moved to the anniversary of his death, which is September 27th, and this changed in 1969. So apparently a lot of changes happened.
Yeah, the Pope in 69 is just like,
Oh my
a lot of
goodness.
these dates are wrong, I guess.
We probably saw a whole bunch like doubled or tripled up, and then some dates without where
There's
it's like,
so many saints.
I mean, you could probably, we should dive into like saintology.
Sure. So we've got like 360 good days for saints.
Yeah.
Because Christmas Day, Jesus shouldn't be made to share a day with any other saints.
Same with Easter. Yeah.
Right. Mary's got half of a week to herself.
I'd be really curious to just like go through a calendar because you could probably cite at work. Well, sorry, it's St. Vincent's feast day today. I can't convince.
The Vatican has a calendar that you can
I'm sure,
look up.
yeah. It may not need a whole episode, but maybe something for our Discord.
Sure.
Anyway, there are still, and the full name is Society of St. Vincent de Paul. So there's still St. Vincent de Paul societies all over the world, though the society was not actually founded by Vincent de Paul.
Just people who really
liked him and wanted to emulate what he was doing. So I've seen them in Ireland a lot. I think we do have a Vincent de Paul where we are. I think they're less common in North America than in Europe, but
Sure.
Google it. You'll find one near you.
So Vincent is the patron of prisoners, horses, the lost and found, and lepers.
Huh.
Father Damien, not his real name. Kind of like Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
Father and mother. So Father Damien was born in Belgium in 1840. Father Damien, when he was born, was known as Joseph de Voister.
Very Belgian name.
Sure.
Belgian name.
So Joseph ended up traveling to the kingdom of Hawaii as a missionary with the Congregation of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary, where he treated people with leprosy. And so he chose for himself the name Damien when he joined the Sacred Heart Club.
For his work, the King of Hawaii, because of the time I wasn't part of the States yet,
Right.
made Damien a Knight Commander of the Royal Order of Kalakaua. Sometimes I read these words for the first time and realize I have to pronounce them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the famous Mother Teresa, Damien's work made headlines and brought in donations from all over the world, including from Protestants.
Really good for before everybody was getting TV. Like Mother Teresa had that advantage.
Yeah. 1840, that's just newspaper.
Right. In addition to caring for people with leprosy, he worked with the community to build houses, roads, schools, hospitals, and of course, churches.
So when we talk about the community, it was a leper community specifically.
He was living in a leper colony.
So he was trying to, again, I mean, at this time there was no care, so their fates were sealed, but at least, giving them some amenities.
There's some real advantages to being in a nation of many small islands that you can just say, you guys can continue to live happily over there. There's obviously a lot of problems with that, but these people are actually infectious. So,
and to that point, Damien died of leprosy in 1889 at the age of 49. I mean, the fact that he could do that much work before getting it himself is kind of impressive.
Right? I mean, I couldn't find how long he had leprosy, but
even if it took him a long
up.
time to contract it.
Sure, yeah. Anyway, in 1992, almost a century later, the Pope confirmed that in 1895, A dead Father Damien healed a nun's IBS overnight after she prayed to him for relief. Several other healings are also attributed to Damien. So he is called the Martyr of Charity because he gave his life to help people out.
Sad, but I like it.
Yeah.
Better than getting expensive open heart surgery.
Teresa.
I actually don't know if it was open heart surgery, but she did have a heart problem and she did see expensive doctors for it.
Yeah.
Teresa. Father Damien was canonized in 2009. His feast day is May 10th for some and April 15th for others. That's April 15th is his death day, including American Episcopalians.
Yeah.
So he was like cross-religious, even though it's all Christianity. But
yeah, there's a lot of these old imperial tradition churches that are cool with saints. And a lot of these saints they share just because they're so far back in history. This dude was a Catholic long after the Church of England had split off. And Episcopalians and Anglicans still big fans.
well, and even to think before Hawaii was part of America, right? It was its own kingdom, its own separate culture. So even to get the notoriety and respect when you're on this tiny island nation.
Yeah.
In a time before media. Pretty impressive.
Right. So Damien is another patron of lepers for what feels like a pretty good reason.
Yeah. I don't know if Vincent de Paul did anything with lepers, but this one is definitely more fitting.
Right.
Now we have another lady saint, Catherine Drexel. What a great name. Catherine was born to a very rich banker family in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1858. After her mom died, Catherine was raised for a short time by her uncle Anthony, who's the founder of Drexel University, until her father remarried.
So, very.
Yes. I don't like how she spells Catherine because it's spelled differently than mine, and so it was very hard to type.
So,
I spelled it wrong every time.
I did some searching, and the spelling of her name actually varies from source to source.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, Wikipedia always shows up first when you Google stuff, and so the spelling we have here in our notes is what Wikipedia says, but I found other variants as well.
Her family was very involved with the church and community support, and Catherine chose to become a nun when she was 30.
When she was 32, she founded a congregation called Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament to support Black and Indigenous Americans.
I thought that was so interesting just based on the time that she lived. Far before the civil rights movement.
Yeah. It would have been a problem for a lot of the people she hung out with.
Yeah.
I mean, New York is better than, say, Georgia.
But definitely before her time. So
yeah,
even to recognize that there was an issue.
And then she went on to found Xavier University of Louisiana. So she did head south. And this is the only historically Black Catholic university in the United States.
Isn't that mind-blowing? That blew my mind. Because there's historically Black colleges.
Yeah.
But this is the only Black Catholic college in the U.S. I thought that was...
Yeah. And, I mean, the reason that it took off the way it did and worked out was because segregation was...
Yeah. In addition to the university, she founded other schools for Black and Indigenous children in New Mexico, Tennessee, and Arizona.
He got around.
Making money soon.
Yeah, she could afford it. It was pretty great. So she supported the Dominican Sisters of St. Catherine de' Ricci to care for children in Cuba as well during the Spanish-American Civil War. All over the place, that money helps a lot.
Well, and I just love her cause.
Sure.
You know.
Helping elevate people who have been marginalized and suppressed. Yeah.
In a time before, I won't say anyone was doing it, but when very few people were doing it. Yeah. I think it's cool. Catherine died in 1955 at age of 96. By the time of her death, she had spent more than $12 million on charitable work. You think of what $12 million in 1955 is worth now. That's a ton of money.
In 1974, somebody prayed to her to heal an ear infection. And this was approved by the Pope in 1988. So she was beatified.
Good.
And then a little while later, 1994, Catherine was credited with healing congenital deafness, which was approved in 2000. So Catherine was sainted that year.
Her feast day is March 3rd, which is the anniversary of her death. And she's the second American to be sainted. So that's 2 women.
That's 2 women and 2 total American saints in the year 2000.
Yeah, because remember, Elizabeth was the first American saint, Seton.
Right.
That was in the 1700s.
Yeah.
So that's wild.
So we got one saint in 1975 and the second one 25 years later.
And the first 2
are women. Super
first
cool.
2 and women, but it took till the 2000s to get American saints. So she is the patron saint of racial justice.
Feels appropriate.
Feels appropriate. She has more than 30 churches dedicated to her and more than a dozen schools. So that's pretty cool.
It was a cool list. I mean, all over the place.
Yeah. Another woman.
Not just a woman. This is Princess Elizabeth of Hungary.
Ooh, women don't start wars. So this, historically, a woman has never started wars. This feels right.
I'm not aware of a woman starting a war. I can't argue with you.
Helen of Troy doesn't count.
Men have started many wars over women. Be sure of that.
So it just feels like really appropriate that a lot of the good saints are women. But we did have some garbage saints that were women too. So I guess it's...
Teresa.
Looking at you, Mother Teresa. There was that other one who was like chased by a dragon and like came out of her window in our very first episode.
Oh, yeah.
Her dad.
The one that probably wasn't even a real person.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Tell me more about Princess Elizabeth.
So she was the daughter of King Andrew II of Hungary. She was born in 1207. And because it's, good 800 years ago, we're actually not 100% sure if she was born in proper Hungary as we know it today, or if she was born within the borders of what is today Slovakia.
Okay.
Stories conflict. We just have uncertainty. She studied the Franciscan tradition and committed to live their principles as much as she could as a young woman. I thought that was interesting. There are doubts about whether she actually did join the Third Order of St. Francis, which was for people who weren't part of the clergy or the religious organizations.
So kind of the secular idea again, but pre that.
It was founded in 1221, so she could have, and they do claim that she was a member of their order. She is the patroness of their order even.
Okay.
But historians are not entirely convinced. She was married before she was 15.
But I guess in 1200.
It was pretty normal 800 years ago, but it still feels icky.
Betty's most famous miracle is one of deception. She would sneak bread out of the castle to feed the poor, and her husband thought it was okay. So it's weird that she was being sneaky. Rumors commonly told that she was stealing treasures from the castle. One day on such an errand, she ran across her husband's hunting party, and he asked her to show his mates what she was carrying. Instead of bread or treasures, all they saw was red and white roses. This convinced Betty's husband that God supported her work.
Wouldn't that raise more questions, though? I'm trying to imagine this situation playing out in real life, and it's still wild.
I mean, this is all about positive saints, but maybe there's just a lot of lies in Catholicism. Looking at you, Mother Mary. I swear this is what I was doing. I swear an angel visited me, and it's God's baby. I swear I was feeding the poor, not stealing roses from a market stall.
So the advantage to the biblical story of Mary is that Joseph is also said to have an angel come to him and say, "What's up?" And it probably wasn't just the real father with a flashlight.
Have you seen that meme? I'm sure we've talked about it before, where it's like, Joseph, baked you a cherry pie, Mary. And Mary goes, "But we don't have any cherries, Joseph." And he goes, "See how ridiculous that sounds?" Or God gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Betty was widowed at 20. And so she got her dowry back and used it to build a hospital, not just for the sick, but also to house the poor, because hospitals did double duty back in the day.
Yeah. She wasn't such a poor Betty.
Not financially poor, maybe woeful.
Yeah, definitely woeful. They have some of her writings from when this happened, allegedly, that she was absolutely grief-stricken, naturally. Married some dude that she ended up actually really liking when she was 14.
And if she's a princess, he's some sort of royalty too.
Yeah, he was the equivalent of a count.
Okay.
So it was pretty cool for her. And she was devastated when it happened, and she just devoted the rest of her life to helping these people out. She died in 1231 at the age of 24.
Oh, wow. That's too young.
Right? Couldn't find what got her, but didn't live long after her husband died. And so shortly after her death, a bunch of healings were reported in her hospital's chapel and at her grave. So she was sainted in 1235, a very short time later, when she would have been 27.
That's not even allowed anymore. You have to wait 5 years before beatification.
Right.
And then even longer for canonization.
I mean, every now and then somebody gets fast-tracked, but not
Teresa
often.
got fast-tracked. John Paul II got fast-tracked. Those were our most recent ones. But then this obviously might be before those rules were in place. But very fast in saintdom.
So, just in case you were down about your own accomplishments, you didn't get sainted by the time you were 27.
You do have to die to become a saint, though. So
yeah.
If you want to feel really down about your accomplishments, Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote Jesus Christ Superstar when he was like 22 years old. That one kills me.
It's a banger.
Yeah.
The whole show.
But also like it's been around for 50 years. And he wrote it when he was like, what were you doing at 22, Preston? Not that.
Not that.
Depending on who you ask, Betty's feast day is November 17th, 18th, or 19th.
She is the patron of brides and widows, nurses and bakers, and exiles and dying children.
Some of those are happy.
Yeah. I mean, when you die at 24, you're going to be associated with a lot of sadness, I think.
Yeah. I mean, about half. Widows, exiles, and dying children are sad. But brides, nurses, and bakers are generally positive.
Sure.
I like cookies.
Yeah.
And weddings.
And John Bosco.
John Bosco was born in 1815 in what is now northwestern Italy.
He was a big fan of Mary. We've talked about people who really like Mary. Luckily, we don't have any wet dream stories from John Bosco. Everything he did was dedicated to Mary, or a couple of things also to Francis de Sales. But mostly, huge fan of Mary. That inspired all of his real work.
John was a priest working in Turin, Italy, who spent his life helping disadvantaged youth. In particular, he worked with abandoned boys to help them find work. He would speak to them in shops and marketplaces rather than staying in the confines of the church. So he would meet people where they're at.
Seems like a pretty good gig.
I mean, it's a good way to build trust with people.
Right. Not only did Bosco get the young men jobs, but he also made sure that they were treated fairly and appropriately by their employers, making sure they get paid for their work and not physically beaten. So they had to work in the trade they were apprenticed to. They weren't just whipping boys and broom pushers, but actually training to do the things that they're surrounded by all day.
Yeah, I mean, we still see that today where you're hired for one thing and you end up doing not that.
Especially in my line of work.
So that's awesome that someone was advocating for them.
Yeah.
John also wrote a lot. He wrote more than 200 titles and also produced a journal that persists today.
He did end up dying in 1888 at the age of 72. So, good old age.
Better than Betty.
By a long shot. He was sainted in 1934, and he was declared a patron of Catholic editors and publishers, and illusionists and magicians, which I thought was really cool.
Do they mean illusionist in like the modern term or the old term?
What's the difference?
I'm pretty sure like an illusion, because there was a show, The Illusionist. I think it's like...
With, why can't I think of his name now? He played the Hulk.
Edward Norton.
Yeah. Is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah, but there's like an old... I think there's an old definition of it. Maybe I'm thinking of a different word. I'm Googling. I'm thinking of a mentalist, which is an old term for a...
So magicians who perform for children often dedicate their shows to good old John Bosco. And many will put on free shows for kids on Bosco's feast day.
Which is?
His death day.
Nice.
January 31st. So you're looking for a free show. 31st of January is probably your best bet, depending on where you're at. In a good Catholic community, chances are good.
Yeah, go to Europe. You'll have better luck than North America.
Yeah. He's also memorialized in the Church of England. Again, a little late for them to naturally share saints with the Catholic Church. So the Church of England just happened to like all the work that he did.
That's good.
So we've got 7 pretty good saints.
They make up for...
They try to make up for the bad
I was
ones.
going to say. St. Bernard's still my favorite, though, even though he's a bad saint.
He's, at the very least, very questionable.
I adore him. I was telling a friend the other day that when I saw his statue in Portugal, I didn't need to read the plaque. I just knew from how it was at Mary's breast. I was like, that's fucking St. Bernard. And then I read the plaque. And I was right.
Well, that's part of the rules with building really good iconography around these saints, is that you should recognize them based on the various features, connect them to a story that you know about the saint. And the best one we've got for St. Bernard includes Mary's boobs.
Includes Mary's boobs. What a guy. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to some good saints, or maybe you want more bad saints. Let us know in our Discord. If you want to connect with us there, or you can connect with us on Facebook or Instagram. We also post all our shows on YouTube.
We've also got Patreon and Spreadshop, where you can support us, get some great merch or other perks.
Other perks. I love it. And as the Catholics say,
Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself.